The incident: a sudden silence. On the morning of November 11, 2025, the skies over the Azerbaijan-Georgia border region were as quiet as any other day. But in a brief moment, that silence was shattered by an almost unthinkable event. A Turkish Air Force C-130 transport aircraft, a line of planes renowned for its durability across decades, suddenly disintegrated while flying at cruising altitude. There was no warning signal sent, no emergency call, just a regular flight path that simply vanished. A C-130 breaking into 3 parts midair is always a sign of an extremely serious problem. Incidents of this nature do not happen because of a minor glitch. They require a stronger element, a long-accumulated weakness, hidden damage beneath the aging metal, or a force exceeding the limits the airframe could bear. When the debris fell onto the Sinagi region of Kakheti, it was immediately clear that the chance of survival was virtually zero. The aircraft, once a symbol of endurance in numerous operations, was now just disjointed parts scattered across a stretch of hills near the border. All 20 members on board, people doing work the rest of the world rarely sees, did not return. An accident is never just a single event. It is a warning bell. And this incident raised a far more important question. What in the system, maintenance, aircraft lifespan, or operational approach caused a seasoned transport aircraft to fail in a sky that was familiar to it? This is not just a story about a flight ending mid-journey, but a reminder that in aviation, every gap, no matter how small, eventually finds a way to reveal itself. The journey of an old veteran in the sky. Looking at what remained in the Sinagi Valley, many forget that before it disintegrated in the sky, that C-130 was a true veteran. It carried the tail number 68 to 1609, left the production line in 1968, and served for nearly 6 decades in various environments. Initially, it belonged to the Royal Saudi Air Force. Then, in March 2010, the aircraft transferred to the Turkish Air Force. That is a long time for any transport airframe, especially one that worked in all kinds of missions, from resupply to strategic transport. Aircraft lifespan is not simply measured in years. It lies in the flight hours, operating conditions, maintenance quality, and the level of fatigue accumulated over time. A C-130, despite its famous durability, is not immune to the tiny cracks that can appear in its metal structure after tens of thousands of takeoffs and landings. These cracks, if not detected in time, can silently expand with every flight. On the day of the incident, 68 to 1609 took off from Ganja International Airport in Azerbaijan, heading for Merzifon Air Base in Turkey. It was a short, straightforward journey, considered simple for an experienced transport aircraft. But it is these very simple flights where long-standing weaknesses sometimes become most apparent. Because when everything seems normal, people are likely to overlook small signs. And with an airframe that has a long history like 68 to 1609, any detail taken lightly could become the link that causes a major incident. The C-130 that day did not encounter bad weather, nor did it face obstacles on its journey. It only carried its great age and questions about the level of structural fatigue, questions that, after the accident, everyone in aviation must remind themselves of. The sky is always fair. Every weakness, if it still exists, will one day speak up. The moment the C-130 deviated from its normal path. From the initial documents, the flight path of 68 to 1609 that morning was completely smooth. It departed Ganja Airport at 10:19 Universal Time Coordinated, climbed steadily, and entered Georgian airspace exactly on schedule. There was no indication that the crew was facing problems. No abnormal changes in speed. Everything was up to standard for a routine transport flight. But upon reaching approximately 7,300 meters, an altitude that poses no stress to a C-130, the aircraft suddenly left its track. According to the data recovered, the last recorded speed was about 302 knots, which is within the perfectly stable range for the Hercules series. And then, like a rope strained for many years, it snapped in an instant. The airframe disintegrated mid-air just 27 minutes after crossing the border. What makes the event notable is that no emergency signal was transmitted. For those who have followed aviation for over 3 decades, like me, the fact that an aircraft loses connection without leaving any sound from the cockpit usually suggests 2 possibilities. Either the incident happened too fast for the crew to react, or the communication system was affected from the very first moment. Both indicate a level of severity far exceeding typical malfunctions. When the data suddenly vanished from the radar screen, it marked the moment the veteran C-130 was no longer capable of maintaining its structural integrity. An old aircraft, carrying decades of metallic scars, can endure a lot, but not infinitely. And at that altitude, all it takes is one weakness to suddenly expand, perhaps in the wing, the central fuselage, or the tail connection area, and everything can spiral out of control in less than a breath. The moment 68 to 1609 disintegrated in the sky was not just a shock to observers. It reiterated a simple yet sometimes forgotten truth. In aviation, whether military or civilian, no aircraft is immune to time. And when small signs are ignored, the sky will speak in its own way, fast, cold, and without warning. The people on the final flight of 68 to 1609. In every aviation investigation, a section is always dedicated to looking at the list of those present on the flight. Not to recount their private lives, but to understand the aircraft's mission, and thereby piece together another fragment of the big picture. With 68 to 1609, that number was 20, all of whom were military personnel, according to Ankara's confirmation. Some local sources in the Caucasus region suggested there might have been accompanying Azerbaijani soldiers, but this information was never clearly confirmed. The key point here is not which unit they belong to, but the nature of a military flight in peacetime, typically neat, on schedule, and rarely attracting attention. A C-130 transporting military personnel on assignment is a familiar sight in many parts of the world. In the sky that day, 20 people were simply traveling from point A to point B, entirely routine with no signal indicating a change in plan. Their presence on the decades-old aircraft also raised a crucial question that professionals understand. Military transport requirements often rely on the Hercules series' long-standing reliability. This is an aircraft type that is seen as hardworking, able to withstand many harsh environments. Therefore, putting 20 military personnel on the plane was not outside the force's normal safety standards. But that very fact highlights the unexpected nature of the incident. A short flight, an old airframe still in service, and 20 people conducting a routine mission all indicate no unusual factors from the start. When the aircraft disintegrated midair, as analyzed earlier, it underscored a chilling reality. In both military and civilian aviation, people can follow all procedures, but when the aircraft structure is subjected to stress beyond its limit, the sky will not favor anyone. The 20 military personnel on that flight were part of a broader picture. A story about the limits of engineering and the responsibility of humans to recognize warning signs before it is too late. The investigation after the crash of 68 to 1609. While the metal fragments still lay amidst the cold dust of the mountainous region, the Turkish investigation team immediately mobilized a 46-person team to head out. No rest, no hesitation. For them, time is what can blur the evidence. At the scene, the investigative team moved between the torn fuselage sections, documenting every small detail, like people who are all too familiar with tracking the traces of a structure that failed midair. The data recorder, black box, was found in a condition intact enough to be taken back to Ankara for analysis. In the industry, everyone understands that this device is not there to tell a story, but to point out what the aircraft experienced before losing control. The data streams within it, speed, load factors, vibrations, are the key to reconnecting the final seconds of the old airframe. Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer of the C-130 series, also quickly joined the investigation. This is a familiar step. When a long lifespan airframe encounters a serious incident, those who understand its structure best must be involved. They are not looking for excuses. They are searching for weaknesses that might have been overlooked for too long. Immediately after the accident, the entire Turkish C-130 fleet was grounded. This was a tough but necessary decision. The Air Force knew well that sometimes the problem is not with the specific aircraft that crashed, but with the entire fleet in service. The act of freezing the entire squadron allowed technicians to re-examine every aircraft, every crack, every beam that had suffered fatigue over time. Overall, this investigation is not just about answering why 68 to 1609 disintegrated. It is also a cold reminder that in the world of aviation, even military, what kills a flight is sometimes not a moment of risk, but cracks that silently extend over many years that humans fail to notice in time. the cold search in the mountains, and the world's reaction. While the investigation team was tracing every crack on the airframe, another parallel operation was underway, bringing everything remaining from the flight home. The challenging terrain of the Georgian mountains made access difficult, but rescue forces from Turkey, Georgia, and Azerbaijan coordinated straightforwardly, without embellishment. They divided the areas section by section, searching for every trace left by the old C-130 that collapsed amidst the fog. There was no miracle to expect. Only manpower, experience, and persistence. As body parts and aircraft debris were found, everything was silently transferred back to Turkey. For longtime professionals, this is not a ritual. It is the final responsibility owed to those who were on board. Technical teams also monitored every recovered fragment, as any piece of metal could hold clues about the final moments of a structure that had endured too many years of fatigue. On the international stage, the reaction came quickly, much like other major events that have shaken the military aviation industry. Azerbaijan's leadership offered condolences almost immediately. The U.S. ambassador to Turkey affirmed that Washington stood alongside Ankara during this difficult time. NATO also issued a clear message of solidarity, a signal that the alliance fully understood the strategic value of the C-130 fleet and the pressures involved in operating a squadron that has served for decades. All these condolences do not change what happened, but they reflect a hard truth of the aviation world. Whenever a machine like the C-130 fails, it is not just one country's concern. It is a universal wake-up call about the limits of old technology, of long-term maintenance over many years, and of flight missions exceeding the original lifespan the designers once conceived. The mark forcing the Turkish Air Force to face the fleet's lifespan. For those who have followed military aviation for a long time, this incident is not just a sad footnote in history. It is a warning bell hitting home the reality many forces worldwide are facing: operating a fleet that has surpassed the age the designers once projected. With all 20 people on the flight unable to return, the Turkish Air Force had to view this as one of its heaviest losses in recent years, both in personnel and the C-130, which is the backbone of transport missions. Immediately after the incident, the fastest action taken was not lengthy press conferences, but the decision to ground the entire C-130 fleet. In this industry, that move always carries a very clear meaning. Something deep within the structure or operating system makes it impossible to continue flying without a route inspection. Grounding the entire aircraft type indicates that commanders understand they are facing the possibility of a serious technical error, potentially related to maintenance or the age of airframes that have served for decades. This story is not about blame. It is about pointing out that any force relying on older aircraft will have to confront the same equation. When is maintenance no longer enough to keep everything stable in the sky? The Turkish Air Force must now consider a future where transport missions cannot perpetually depend on the aging fleet. An incident like this always leaves consequences far beyond the scene. It shapes how a nation views safety, modernization budgets, and the limits of machines that have passed the half-century mark.